that beginner friendly. I apologize in advance. I'll break it down into small chunks for you guys. And I guess the first question is like, some of you guys are brand new to Ruby. Are you using like say Cursor? Are you using Claude? Are you doing any of the AI stuff to help you code right now today? It's okay. It's not a cheating to do it. It's not a, no? Yes? Okay, cool. So we'll be covering some of that, how to build better software, okay? Right now, the way people are looking to build software is you put a prompt in, make me a dog application to train my dog, and it comes out in 5 minutes. And it's wonderful, but you don't really have much control over what actually comes out. Can I get a show of hands? How many has that happened to? Like where you just throw in a prompt or make me a prompt to build an application and you go one shot, cool, done. Suddenly A+, in the owner's eyes, the customer's happy, everybody's happy. But that's called vibe coding, right? Like that's where you're vibing it, you think it looks great, you think it works, wonderful. And some people do this and it's totally fine. It gets the job done. But there's a different way. All right, and this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. I apologize, Ganesh. Completely different talk from what was expected today, but essentially it's about using Ruby on Rails in parallel with an agentic workflow, using AI, but using different approaches to get to that point. All right, so work trees, OpenSpec, beads, and AI agents. A bit about me. You might know me from being here in Nepal for the last 10, 11 years since the earthquake. Had a small company called Vayu. Since then had a construction company called Connex. Since then was working as Director of Engineering for House. Some of you know House, maybe some of you have applied. Connex and House and Vayu was always Ruby in Nepal. And even though now House does a lot more JavaScript than Ruby, unfortunately. You can follow me on Mastodon or my GitHub on Jonathan Clarke. I do not use Twitter, so yeah, don't use Twitter, please. All right, so what's this looking like? So, parallel Rails. Imagine you've got 3 features at the same time. You guys are super busy, right? Your manager is saying, build, 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 ship, ship, ship. And then you're like, okay, I've got all these agents, I've got all these credits, I've got OpenAI, I've got Cursor, I've got Claude, but I have one laptop. I don't have multiple laptops. I'm in Nepal. You know, I only have one Postgres. I only have one Ruby, which gives me port 3000. How does it work? You know, this is the traditional workflow where you check out a branch, which is your feature, and then you have to context switch all the time from branch A to branch B to branch C, okay? This doesn't really work in the agentic workflow because, you know, when you're trying to one-shot a feature, it's gonna, one agent in one tab is gonna say, oh, I'm gonna try and change the same file of routes this way for this specific purpose. I'm going to delete these lines. The other agent in another tab is going to say, I'm going to add in these lines, and then suddenly there's conflicts, okay? So when you check it out, basically your mental model, the way you think is very, you know, it doesn't work, okay? When you're working on yourself, by yourself, in one branch, you're very much focused on that work, and it's wonderful. However, when you're trying to do things in parallel, in alignment, it's a completely different way of working. So, you know, the issue is always going to be your database is on the wrong state, okay? You've got multiple migrations going on, you know, suddenly you've got conflicts in your database. Columns are there that weren't there before, that the other application doesn't know anything about. The things can be dropped, things can be started, you could be running tests at the same time, all on the same database, okay? It's not going to work. All right, so that's the traditional workflow. And how many people know what work trees are? Okay, 1, 2, great, 3, 4, 5, okay, 6. So work trees are just a git command. Okay, it's basically simple. My workspace could be called Neo. Okay, all right, that's my repository. And we use, instead of using branches, a work tree mirrors a branch into a directory outside of your main directory, okay? Whereas we might have, say, Neo here would be the main branch. We don't work from that anymore, okay? We always create a new work tree, and we only ever do the work that we need to outside in a separate folder, okay? That tracks to a specific branch, all right? Now, has anybody heard of what conventional commits are? Yeah? Do they teach this at school or in your companies? If not, on Monday, go and look at conventional commits. It's Friday. I'm not expecting you guys to rush home and do this tonight. But, conventional commits are great because it actually standardizes your workflow. Whether it's creating a new branch, the 42 that we see here in the branch is referring to a ticket, whether it's the GitHub issue, Pivotal Tracker, Jira issue, whatever that is. And then the feat would reference feature, a fix, a doc, a chore, a build, whatever it could be. But you basically have to adhere to conventional commits, okay? So even when you're working off of one issue, it'll be like, oh, this is a document update. It's always going to use the same worktree name, okay? So the worktree now for a new feature is neo-42 feet, all right? So you might have 3 different branches. They all have the conventional worktree naming standard, okay? Conventional commits also works not just for the naming standard of the branch or for the worktree, but also for the commits that you do on that worktree as well, okay? Now, why does it matter? Basically, you need to have conventions in your team because if everybody works in a different way, it's gonna get messy really quickly. Because when you are working, say you're outsourcing, and you give your code base to somebody else and you've got to work off on another project, they need to be mentally not need to switch over from their method of thinking. You all need to be on the same page with how branches are named, how commits are done, how your tests should be written, how code should be done. And those are called conventions, right? We do this in Ruby all the time. We've been doing it from day dot. Ruby is very opinionated. Software engineering, less so, okay? You can write the same application in 5 million different ways. So many different languages, single changes all the way through. But with Ruby, what we try and do is we try to make this a convention. We try and let Rails or Ruby do the heavy lifting for us so that our mental model doesn't shift too far away. So it's really important that, when you're passing stuff to your teammate, that they're working in the same way as well, okay? Now, Git work trees, one Git repo, many checked out working directories. Eventually, you're going to have lots and lots of directories in your workspace. And that's wonderful. So you get a new directory with its new checkout, you get a new branch tracking main, and you get a shared .git, okay? You're not taking a lot of new space, you're not replicating .git, which could be gigabytes of size depending on the workspace, okay? You're basically, even your master.key doesn't come over unless you want it to, okay? So you might need to copy that over. Now, the Rails specific problem is work trees aren't alone for a Rails app. If you've got 2 work trees, one Postgres system, work tree A runs migration 42, which is drop table, okay? And then work tree B basically goes, oh, I actually needed that table to finish this because this is going to ship first. Work tree A is going to ship in 2 weeks' time. Okay, it's something down the track, okay? The same for the dev servers, but basically, both are trying to bind to port 3000. So you have a different state of database, okay? So how do we get around that? So you just isolate by work tree. So before you would have had Neo development, Neo test, okay? That would have been off your main folder. But now you actually have Neo development work tree -42 feet, okay? Neo test work tree 42 feet. So you now have a dedicated database for your work tree, okay? So how do you do that? You basically just read the directory. It's very simple. It seems complicated. It's not really. You just grab the directory name and you add that in. It's okay to have lots of databases. It doesn't really hurt you too much, It's all about how you seed, how you test, And then when you're using bin dev, unless you were like before from years and years ago, you're using bundle exec rails.ash, it was always defaulting port 3000. When you're doing bin dev, if you add some greps, you export the port, suddenly your work tree, the conventional commits, is using the port number that is relevant to the issue number, okay? So suddenly your port, you can have multiple Rails applications at the same time, okay? So that means I could go to 3042 port on my local host, and I can be very focused on that one application of that work tree, that one feature of the work tree, okay? Feel free to ask questions if you want to be interactive, it's fine. Or if I'm going too fast. So creating work tree is quite easy. You can do worktree.add and track a branch, which is really nice. Or you can get Claude to do this, and you can say, hey, this is a skill, create a work tree, set up the environment for me, bind the port, set the database. It'll do this type of thing for you. All of this suddenly is a new feature, fully isolated in 30 seconds that you can have on your machine. Some people used to do this with Docker. Docker takes a lot of time to build, you know. This is a bit faster. So now that's setting up your environment to code to access the application. How many of you guys know what specs are, or OpenSpec specifically is? Has anyone used OpenSpec or the concept of OpenSpec? Okay. So OpenSpec is not rocket science, okay? The goal is to kind of replace the project manager in your life with a set of simple text files, all right? So what happens when a project manager approaches you and they've got a little document and says, okay, task A, go to this page, task B, click this button, task C, I should see this text on this field or this value. All they're giving you is the guidelines or the approach to build an application, okay? OpenSpec does the same, all right? So why do we need specs? Because if you give it a prompt and you one-shot it, you're going to miss so much information. You're not going to be challenged. You're giving it the loosest possible definition, because us as developers, I as a developer, I'm super lazy. I say, I want to build an authentication page, and I assume that AI knows what an authentication page is, okay? Sure it does. But then branch that out into something a bit more domain specific, you know, into a bit more of a problem that your customer is facing and wants you to build. It might not have a clue of what it's trying to build. It might never have seen anything of that application before. And if you give it the loosest possible context, and context is everything with AI. So what you need to do is define specs. So OpenSpec, you've got 3 commands. You can install it on your system, okay? It'll give you 3, actually it gives you 4 commands. The last command is archive. So the first command is explore, second command is propose, third command is apply, last command is archive, all right? Explore, you can use to get your agent to ask you questions, okay? So you would say, I would normally say, OPSX, explore the GitHub issue number or the Jira issue number. It goes, fetches that via CLI, not MCP. Do not use MCP if you can. It pulls down the context of the ticket, the comments, and it wraps it up, okay? It examines it, and then it asks you questions. So it'll be like, well, you know, what authentication strategy are you using? Are you using Devise? Do you want to use something else? Do you want to roll your own? Do you want to be insane and let everything in plain text? Do you want everybody to use the same username and password? God knows, anything could happen in this. So it asks you the questions and it forces you to think through the problem that's being presented to it, okay? The second step is the proposal. After you've thought through the problem, after you've answered the agentic AI's questions about the problem, you know, you have to create a proposal. And a proposal is basically markdown documents, okay? I'll give examples as well as we go through it. The markdown documents go from a high level to what it will look like on the front end, to the impact on the back end, to the files that are going to be changing. And the proposal will also create tasks, okay? So a task could be add one single input field, a text input, which has a password field. That's one, okay? Add an email field, add a button. Each of those, there's 3 tasks. The next task would be when I go here and there, I fill this in, I click this button, you know, then it will return back, oh, you've got the wrong password, okay? Those are all tasks, and specs are tasks. All of these, you want to break it down from a high level approach to the smallest teeny tiny little task you possibly can. Okay, so when you do the propose, you've got 3 new files. And then when you do the apply, essentially Claude, Codex, whatever your AI flavor of choice is, will take each task and implement it one by one. So instead of asking it to write your application, you're asking it to write a single line of code, or a single change, or a single route. You're breaking it down to the smallest possible thing it could do. So one single page could end up being 200 tasks, okay? Now, an example of Explore, users change their email, nothing visible happens, Devise silently stores an unconfirmed email. confirmed email, sends a link, but the profile page gives no feedback. Explore will actually think with you. There's no code being talked about during this. It's just approaches. It could be architecture. It could actually be talking about, you know, the top level stuff, the difficult stuff that your PM often wouldn't know about. If you still have a PM in your company, I don't know, times are changing. So you have to use it as a way of not reinforcing what you've given, but as a way to challenge you with your conventions. You know, some of the people here, 1 month, 2 months experience, some 5 years, some 15 years. I've been doing this for a very long time, and I love being challenged on my conventions, on my cognitive bias. I love being challenged to be given new approaches. Hey, did you think about this? Did you ever think about approaching it from this way? You'll save time. It's a smaller library or it's a smaller gem. You know, I love being given the opportunity to change my approach because I learn and I love learning every single day. So with the output of Explore, you have to remember not a single file has been written yet. The context has changed from this context to this context. And you're given more and more information back to the model for it to understand and ask you questions. 0 files written at this point. Next point, propose. When you run this, essentially it'll take the proposal, the design, and the tasks, and it'll write 3 different text files. Okay? Why and what changes and impact in the proposal. In the design, how, decisions and alternatives considered. Tasks, concrete implementation checklist. The tasks are basically what you wish GitHub would give you in your issues, or you wish your PM would give you, just so you could be brain dead and hungover and you can write code. Okay? You could work from this without any AI after this. You know, you could actually take the tasks and just do it yourself and just go tick, 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 add it into GitHub, add it into Jira. It's just checkboxes of things to do, work to do. Still no code yet at this point, okay? You're trying to get the most information you possibly can and the smallest level of work that you have to work on to get something running through. So an example of an excerpt of a proposal. Devise silently stores unconfirmed email, the profile page gives no feedback, what changes, and the impact, okay? The impact is just the code changes, right? Okay, the things you should be looking at, the views, you may be needing to create new views, okay, new routes. And then the application here, does the markdown look familiar? It's just markdown that you would add into a Jira ticket, right? As you tick through. This is what you're doing manually, right? Okay? Each checkbox should be a commit. Now, you notice at the very end, I say a bead. Has anyone heard of the concept of beads? No? Well, one has, 2 maybe. Beads came from a system called Gastown. Gastown was an AI system. Steve Yege wrote it. Beads are basically, it's like a mini project management, task management tool on your computer. It's a queryable task graph, all right? So from the task.md, it creates a bead for each task, okay? And you can see here, a bead is just a little database that's on your computer, okay? And it's created 3 different tasks based off that, and it's also created dependencies on this as well, all right? So suddenly, you can realize I have to do task, you know, I have to do task 1 before 2 and 3 can open up, okay? Or actually I have to do, for task 42.3, I've got to get 42.1 done, and then 42.2 and 42.3 can run in parallel at the same time, okay? And what loves small little units of work? It's AI, okay? So what is Beads? Beads is basically a single binary you can download, okay? It's a database, Beads database. You can use SQLite, I don't. I use JSON-L, okay, which I commit to Git. So that means that I don't have to have a shared machine sharing a database or having databases connecting and corrupting rows. It's all just JSON. It works from the context of the branch that I'm in, okay? It's built for the command line. It's built for AI agents. You can go to Gastown Hall and download Beads on your laptop. There's also a BV, which is a Beads viewer, and it's like Git-K or Git, like, you know, a Git viewer. Similar thing, similar process. So what can you do with it? You can basically manipulate tasks. okay, with context. So BD create, list, ready, show, dep add, update. You can do this all manually, or you can let your agent do it. If you describe it and say, here, these are the tasks. This is what you can do with beads. Every time you do an OPSX apply or propose, create the beads for me, export the JSON file, done. Okay, now I can just pick up the next one. BD ready is what's next, okay? What's the next task we take on? It's the killer command. It's the one command you'll use always, because it's the next thing without you even having to think, without the model having to think and pull down 500 different GitHub tickets and go, what do I work on next? You just say, what's next? It's already on the machine. It's already on the file, okay? You just get it. So tying it together, one bead, one work tree. Sure, I actually do one work tree, multiple beads. You could do both. Depends how you work. If you want to farm this out and go to bed and wake up and all your tasks are done, sure, one bead, one work tree, that works fine. For me, I like to go through it as the code is changing. I look at the code, I argue about the code. Is this not better? Why are you changing this? Oh, because of this. Okay, cool. I have a mental understanding about it. Okay, so each work tree can hold one claim task. Each work tree could hold many claim tasks. Okay, I do it with many. You can do it with one if you like. So we talked about SQLite with BD. This is how you export your database to your issues file with BD. Okay. Now, the problem with BD is this file, issues.json, as your application grows, and some of you have been working on applications for over 10 years, okay? That can get to be a big file. What hates huge files? What gives you, you might have a little limit on your token usage in your company. And some companies like to say, hey, we used 1 billion tokens this month, and that's cool if you're an NVIDIA or if you're, some other company. But I guess for us, we're very conservative with our tokens, okay? So you can choose to be very specific about the context of what you work with from that issues file. Only bring in the issues that matter for the context of the work tree. It doesn't need to know about the 1,000 issues that have been created. It only needs to know about the 5 issues that you're working on for that work tree. So what does a bead look like? In JSON, looks pretty familiar. Okay, it's a very simple thing. There's the title, the priority, the task, the dependencies. Very, very simple. It's just saying do X, do a small thing. And it's open text. You're not tied to a commercial database or a commercial offering or another company. It's free, it's open source. You can export these beads using JQ. You can manipulate them. It's a graph query language. Same data. Where this comes into next, and I've talked about AI agents as we go through, we've had work trees, we've had beads. Now we can add in agents. So we've had a clear bounded task with a bead, we've had an isolated work tree or workspace with our work tree, and we've had a shared spec. So nobody is guessing about what needs to be built. So the agent's job isn't, hey, build this and one-shot it and there's ambiguity. It's specifically execute BD 42.1, which is the small unit of work, which then saves you tokens, which saves you money, which saves you time. This is very similar to the RSpec approach or the TDD approach that you've all been taught when doing Ruby. Very similar. Break it down to small, tiny little chunks and work on it. So agents read the JSON directly, so it can read the issues directly. Do not, for the love of God, use MCP servers. They are terrible, and they will eat your credits, eat your tokens every step of the way. Okay? If you can use a CLI, it's more specific. It'll get you what you want back faster. Okay? But the agent sees what you see: structured, complete, current information on the work it needs to do. So teaching Claude the workflow. Some of you use Claude. How many of you are using Claude right now? Well, okay, let's say half, more than half. Claude.md could be also agents.md, could be cursor.md, it doesn't matter. It's all just text. I break up my workflow into different rules with Claude. I do it the same with agents as well. basically I have a Git workflow which says, okay, for this issue, GitHub issue, pull this ticket down, you can read it, and that uses the GitHub CLI. Okay, task management, that's my beads workflow. Pick up the next ready ticket, close this ticket, add a dependency. That does this with Claude. And then my architecture, all of you should have rules file with your agents, talking about how is your architecture set up. Well, I use MySQL and Ruby 2.5 with Rails 3. That's cool. It's not great, but you can do that. Or you can you need to give context to the agent so it knows what conventions to use, okay? And then for testing, I hope to God every single one of you are testing, okay? With either RSpec, Minitest, it doesn't matter. Also, it's worthwhile looking at Playwright at this point as well, okay, from an end-to-end perspective. It's faster than anything Capybara can get. No prompting, no fine-tuning, it's just markdown, it's just text files. Here's an example, my task management system. Read the issue, break down, get it from the GitHub URL, create the task I have, create the subtasks based off of that issue, add the child, add the parent, claim it before you write any code, okay? This is stuff that happens in the background when you're using agents. You can do this manually if you like, you can tweak it, okay? But essentially the whole goal is to take one task and get it to the closure point. If there's something blocking you, then work on that. If that's the task that needs to be done next, then take it, get it to a closure point, okay? So Claude reads this once, behaves this way that you've defined it, every way, every session, forever. So the full flow, you open the issue, Claude opens the claude.md and rules. You can, number 3 could be BD Explorer or OPSX Explorer on the actual issue, okay, on the GitHub issue to pull it down, okay? Then it can BD list, check the existing work, OPS Explorer, propose, creates the specs. That will then give you tasks. OPSX apply, which will create the beads from the tasks, and BD update will go through it all the way through. All the way from start to finish, close. It's all very straightforward. It's all very clear. Why does it work? Because computers are stupid, like us, We need guidance, Not everybody is a brilliant 10x developer. I certainly am not. And we need to be told what to do, or you need to get the experience to know what to do. How can Claude or Cursor or any AI tool do what you want if you don't tell it implicitly what actually has to happen? So once you start working with conventions, this becomes a lot easier for you guys. So the human work is building the structure, which is essentially what you guys all have every day. When the way you work right now today, it might be commit, work on a piece of code, commit, test work locally, cool, send it to the build server, does it pass, cool, deploy, merge it, or test it again on a staging server, or deploy, or you can work through this structure, okay? You have structure, this has structure. You just need to make sure you're all aligned. And not just you, but your team members. So putting it all together, the full loop, GitHub issue, open spec proposal, beads, work tree, PR, merge, close bead, remove work tree. Okay, every step, explicit, inspectable, reversible. This is a long talk, I'm realizing, sorry about this. 3 work trees, 3 streams, okay? Right now, you're active on one at a time, but you can actually open up multiple tabs now and think of each tab as an employee, a resource, a teammate. And it can be doing this work side by side. And this is where the true power comes in. Now, I'm not going to say one-shot this work. You can do this and let the agent go off and do this when you're asleep. I don't agree with that approach. I think you need to read your code so you understand it, because otherwise it's going to be a mess. It's going to add in libraries that you didn't agree with. And all of you read your PR reviews, right? How long do you spend on your reviews as teams? Be honest. Click, passes green, merge in. Or are you actually going line by line by line? Okay? You should be going line by line by line. Okay? But I understand there's time, like time is money. But if you start going down the approach of true parallelism, where you have it on your laptop, you can get work done, it creates the PR, but you're stepping through the code it's writing as you're doing it. It's a learning experience for you. You will get better as an engineer because the AI is teaching you, but you're also teaching the agent as well. So, work trees, it's great for you because, suddenly you can open things up and have 3 different things going at the same time. Open spec, it'll be the PM that you wish you always had. It'll catch misunderstandings, and it's defined in the spec. I create often my proposal, and I make a PR, and I look at that, and I'm reviewing that spec before anything else happens, because I want to make sure there's no ambiguity, okay? There's no room for, database tables or front-end, back, whatever systems or libraries need to be brought in. It's all very clear, okay? And beads alone removes what's next, so you don't have the decision fatigue of what's next to work on this small piece of code. Let the agent kind of pick up on this, okay? So AI makes this investment pay back faster. I think you definitely can reap the benefits and the rewards of this structure. So steal this on Monday, please, for the love of God, okay? Adopt conventional commits. How many of you guys are using conventional commits in your company? Some of you, yeah, cool. How many of you are using work trees? How many will use work trees? Great, better. How many now will do work trees and DBs per conventions as of this approach? If you're using work trees, you should adopt this, okay? Beads, how many will take on beads and have a look into it and try it out? Yeah, it's pretty cool, yeah. BV, it can visualize everything and make things clearer and give you a better mental model of what needs to happen. Okay, and if you use AI, give it a spec and a bead. Fuck prompts, okay? Honestly. All right, Beads Viewer, it's very simple. It's a terminal UI. If you're in the console, living in the console like me, you like CLI tools. This works really well. And don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of AI. How many of you have heard AI is taking all our jobs? Sure. And for those who are studying, you must be shitting it right now. You're like, Jesus Christ, what am I going to do? Okay? But I'll tell you, senior engineers now, or engineers now, are being hired again because they realize you cannot just let the computer do the work. You have to monitor it. I think of Claude right now, and Cursor, and I've thought of it for a very long time, like the stupidest junior engineer I could possibly have on my team. That's how I treat it. And when it amazes me, I'm like, oh my God, good job, dude, great. But often that's not the case, okay? So look, Git, for all of you, Git was probably around before you started with Ruby. It wasn't for me. Git was just another tool, Before that, we had Subversion, we had Tortoise, we had Mercurial. I think we had different things. Visual Source Safe, I don't know if that's a blast from the past, but that was a Microsoft product. There was a fear that Ruby on Rails was going to replace the 30, 40 engineering team that used to happen with Java. And it absolutely did, and it brought the team size smaller. And it made us more lean, okay? And CI, there was this whole fear that CI is going to replace the QA engineer. It just made us all better. It gave us more results faster. Think of AI as another tool. And it's just how we get reinforced feedback quicker, okay? Same pattern. So just take this, build a workflow around it, make sure you write specs, write documents, do proposals, and get on the same page with the rest of your team members. So go and build things, and that's pretty much it, I think. These are all the links for Git Worktree. You already have it on your laptop if you're using Git. Conventional commits, you can go to that GitHub URL, Jonathan Clarke Presentations, and download this and share it. And go use Beads, go use Claude Code, whatever Cursor if you like. Any questions? There's a lot. Are you guys okay?
Can you go to the slide where you said we're only working at one task at a time?
Yeah.
It's probably like 6 from the last one.
Yeah, I don't actually, myself, I said that. I don't do it. I use one agent and that does multiple tasks. However, where is it? There you go, that one. One bead, one work tree?
It's probably the sixth from the last one, so it's towards the end.
The 3 parallel task.
Forward, 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 forward.
Yeah.
There you go, 3 work streams, 3 streams, yeah. That the one?
Can you like put some clarity on this one? Because you have like multiple agents working
Yeah.
concurrently.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like,
Yeah, so basically an agent for me is a tab, okay? A tab is a work tree. And then I can have multiple tests running on different work trees, run or instigated by the agents at the same time, and they're not conflicting against each other.
I'm a bit confused with the line, the others run when they have very much.
Sure, yeah. If you break this further, okay, and let's say you have a Docker container and its main job is to pull main, and you've got a shared bd.json.yaml file which basically says, hey, these are all our issues that we've got ready to go. And it goes bd ready, and it pulls out that issue, and it goes, okay, cool, create the work tree. And suddenly you can have all of these agents working in parallel if you just spin up multiple containers, multiple jobs. So essentially they can work in parallel, but in isolation. And there's no limit to that number of 3. It's just about your resources and what you're comfortable with. Me, I'm comfortable with doing 3, 4 at a time. My laptop is fine. I've done up to 12 and 15, but I recognize that context is lost. Okay, so it's actually, it's something I know as a manager. Often when you go into a meeting and you're talking about authentication here, billing here, you're talking about customer issues, you've got to switch mentally these models. It's the same when you're switching tabs and work trees. You've got that mental switch because they could be on completely different issues. So I don't think you can scale this up to work completely in isolation and build. If you've done all of your proposals and you're super happy with it, you could spin this up on GitHub Agents or GitHub on GitHub Actions, or let's say a CI like Build Guide, and you could just have it run through these jobs again and again and again, spit out PRs, but you're always going to be the bottleneck because you have to review that code at the end of the day. And often what I find is if you go too far ahead, then things have actually changed on that proposal, because every time you work on something, you get this mental understanding, a better understanding of your customer or of a feature that could potentially impact every other feature going forward. So it's not wise to automate too far in advance. Okay, does that help? Okay, great.
So one question, in your proposal you had design.md, and
Yeah.
does that, if I'm using Google's design.md, does that conflict?
No, it's got its own folder system. So you use OpenSpec, and it's got a naming convention of that, where that actually lives. So it could be OpenSpec /authentication /design.md. Okay, so it doesn't impact at all with what Google says. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
So it says to check in the JSON-L
Yeah.
file into River.
Yeah.
So how will it play along when the team size is, I don't know, like 10 plus people?
I find that, like, when I'm doing it with multiple agents, sometimes I get conflicts because I commit it to the branch or the work tree, I commit it to the branch, and then usually there could be conflicts as you're doing it. You just resolve them as you're going along. It's not a problem. It depends on what phrase you do it at, but ideally it's at the end when you finish the apply phase. What I didn't mention here at the very end was the archive phase of the OpenSpec system, which basically says, these were the decisions you made, here's some artifacts back to the spec, which lives in your main repository once you finish the PR. So when you do a PR, it's just editing that file, saying, hey, these are the 10 tasks we had to do, we've done these 10 tasks, we've pushed it to our branch, we do a merge on the on main, and our PR on main, and then suddenly that index file should grow. Okay? So, does that help? Okay.
Is it like similar to using sub-AI treatment element?
Yeah, you could look at it that way. Yeah. I like doing it on my laptop. This allows you to go with any flavor. You're not tied to Claude. You're not tied to Codex. You could spin this up against, like, if you have the beads and you've got 10 tasks, you could say, hey, these are ready to go. spin it off, and it will be like, okay, I use BuildKite, and I could just load up the container, 10 different agents are running at the same time. You're going to eat through your credits really quickly. So I guess the question is it better to develop slowly along the business line so that you're staying in your token usage of acceptability, so that you're not spending $1,000, $10,000, $1 million on credits? I use $100 Claude subscription every month. I've never broken through the limits on it. So whether I'm developing really slowly or I'm just really careful with my context. How many of you guys have broken through your limits? Yeah? $20? $100? $100? How many, like on the development, how much, like on a single prompt, how many tokens are you using? 5K, 10?
Like that, but like, if I have not run out of the tokens by the weekend, I try to
get another account.
lots of stuff and then run out.
You're one-shotting everything. That's it. But like, this is where you should check. Like at the beginning, I was a similar thing. You should check out the MCPs you're using. Disable them if you're not using them, because they eat credits. They eat tokens. So just reduce that down.
So currently, I'm also being a manager, so
Yeah.
I have to enable those MCP for Jira.
Not really. You can use CLIs. Use a CLI tool instead of an MCP. It's much cheaper. GitHub has one as well. So, most tools have a CLI. And if they don't, build one. So, yeah, makes sense. All right. Any other questions?
So one question, John.
Yeah.
So let's say we say context, right, on the workplace also. If we work on multiple issues, for example, and if a lot of developers are working on them, and there is a chance that context will ever grow over the time, right? So in that case, I think there will also be a situation where hallucination also comes under play, right? So that time, do we need to clean those context over the time, or how?
So the whole point of context is you give your initial Claude context, which was those files I was telling you about, the architecture, and those are fine. But then for the task at hand, before you've given the task, you've already declared the context, and the beads task is a very simple context. So it should be a very small, tiny little bit of context. There shouldn't be conflict on the work trees, because usually, from what I've ever seen with the developer, one developer, one ticket. I don't think I've ever seen a place where multiple developers are working on the same ticket. You should have sub-tickets or relation tickets, but never the same ticket. So you shouldn't have overlap on the work tree naming conventions. But then you talked about hallucination. That really depends on the model you give, and it depends on the context you give. So context is everything. So you have to make sure that you're very limiting. You don't want to overload it with information. You want to give it just about enough to do a good job. And I'm seeing it now. You don't even need to have the latest models. For Ruby, guys, Ruby is the best language for AI, from what I can see, because it's so well defined and so opinionated, like DHH would like. But it allows us to basically have these conventions in place. We don't have to do that thinking of how we structure our code like JavaScript is. JavaScript has a different structure for every repo. I've never seen the same. Quite often, conventions are very different. Whereas with Rails and Ruby specifically, it's very opinionated, it's very defined. So hallucination is less. So I found that even with Claude, I'm going back to like older models, and I'm getting a similar rate of performance with Rails apps, which is great to see. Okay.
So which model do you use?
Right now I'm using 4.6, but I've been going into Kilo, I'm going into Codex as well. But yeah, mainly 4.6 I think at the moment. 4.7 is available. Claude they inflate their numbers on 4.7. Yeah, so anyhow. But now it seems like it's going to be a good time. I think Google just released a new model this week. I think the memory usage, everything is way lower, and the context use, it's a much more efficient model. So we're going to see more and more and more of this, and hopefully we'll have better local models soon. So, and graphics cards hopefully will plummet, and yeah, let's see. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.